Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates painted their nails and gossiped about boys, she spent her afternoons learning to shoot with her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who saw something special in her steady hands and calm demeanor. Her parents called her their little princess, always dressing her in frilly dresses and bows, but Sarah felt more comfortable in boots and jeans. The nickname Princess stuck throughout high school, though it carried different meanings depending on who said it. Her family used it with love, recognizing her gentle heart beneath the tough exterior. Her friends used it teasingly, knowing she could outshoot and outfight most of the boys in their class, but others used it mockingly, especially when Sarah announced her intention to join the military after graduation. "Princesses don't belong in combat," sneered Jake Morrison, the quarterback who had never forgiven Sarah for turning down his invitation to prom. "You'll come running home crying after the first week of basic training." His friends laughed, but Sarah just smiled and walked away. She had learned long ago that actions spoke louder than words. The day Sarah left for Army basic training, her grandfather pressed something into her hands. It was his old Ranger tab, worn and faded from years in his wallet. "This belonged to a real warrior," he whispered. "I have a feeling it's going home where it belongs." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. Rangers didn't cry, and she intended to become one. Basic training proved challenging but not impossible. Sarah's years of physical preparation paid off as she excelled in every aspect of military life. Her drill sergeants initially treated her like porcelain, expecting her to break under pressure. Instead, they discovered a young woman with unshakable determination and natural leadership abilities. She graduated at the top of her class and immediately applied for Ranger School. The selection process for becoming an Army Ranger was brutal. Out of hundreds of applicants, only a small percentage would earn the coveted tab. Sarah faced skepticism from instructors and fellow candidates who questioned whether a woman could handle the physical and mental demands. The grueling training pushed every candidate to their breaking point and beyond. During the mountain phase of Ranger School, Sarah's patrol was conducting a night navigation exercise when they encountered unexpected resistance from opposing forces. As enemy fire erupted around them, several candidates froze in panic. Sarah immediately took charge, coordinating her team's response and leading them to safety. Her quick thinking and decisive action saved lives that night. The swamp phase tested candidates' ability to operate in the most miserable conditions imaginable. Knee-deep in murky water surrounded by snakes and alligators, many strong candidates quit. Sarah pushed through the exhaustion, hunger, and constant dampness. When a fellow candidate collapsed from heat exhaustion, she carried him on her back for 3 miles to the extraction point. The final phase took place in a desert environment that simulated combat operations in harsh terrain. Sarah's leadership abilities shone as she successfully planned and executed multiple missions under extreme stress. Her fellow Rangers began calling her Ghost for her ability to move silently through enemy territory and appear where least expected. Graduation day arrived with pomp and ceremony. As Sarah pinned the Ranger tab on her uniform, she thought of her grandfather and all the doubters back home. The little girl they called Princess had become one of the elite warriors in the United States Army. Her family beamed with pride as she walked across the stage, but Sarah knew this was just the beginning of her journey. Her first assignment took her to Fort Benning, where she trained new recruits in advanced combat techniques. Sarah discovered she had a gift for teaching, able to break down complex military tactics into simple concepts that inexperienced soldiers could understand. Her reputation as both a skilled warrior and patient instructor spread throughout the base. The peaceful training environment changed dramatically when Sarah received orders for overseas deployment. Tensions were rising in a volatile region, and her Ranger unit was being sent to provide security and training for local forces. As Sarah packed her gear, she felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This would be her first real test in combat conditions. The deployment briefing revealed the complexity of their mission. They would be working in a remote area where American forces were not entirely welcome. Local populations were suspicious of foreign military presence, and enemy forces regularly conducted attacks against coalition troops. Sarah's unit would need to maintain constant vigilance while building relationships with community leaders. Upon arrival in the deployment zone, Sarah quickly realized that her biggest challenges would not come from enemy fighters but from within her own ranks. Several Marines from other units made it clear they did not appreciate having a female ranger in their area of operations. Their comments were crude and dismissive, designed to undermine her confidence and authority. The base where Sarah was stationed had been cobbled together from shipping containers and prefabricated buildings. It was functional but hardly comfortable, surrounded by razor wire and guard towers. The constant heat and dust made every day a test of endurance, while the threat of mortar attacks kept everyone on edge. Sarah adapted quickly to the harsh conditions, earning respect from most of her fellow soldiers. During her first week, Sarah volunteered for a dangerous patrol into a nearby village where intelligence suggested enemy fighters were hiding weapons. The patrol leader, a seasoned sergeant, initially hesitated to bring her along. "This isn't training anymore, Princess," he said. "Out there, people die for real." Sarah looked him in the eye and replied, "Then you'll want your best ranger watching your back." The patrol went smoothly, with Sarah's keen observation skills helping them locate a significant weapons cache without firing a shot. Her ability to communicate with local children, who were initially frightened by the soldiers, proved invaluable in gathering information. By the end of the mission, even the skeptical sergeant had to admit that Sarah belonged on his team. As weeks passed, Sarah established herself as a reliable and competent soldier. She took on additional responsibilities, volunteering for the most dangerous assignments and consistently delivering results. Her fellow rangers began to trust her judgment and seek her advice on tactical matters. However, tension continued to simmer with members of other units who resented her presence and success. 3 months into her deployment, Sarah had settled into the rhythm of military life in a combat zone. She woke before dawn each day, conducted physical training with her unit, and spent her afternoons on patrol or training exercises with local forces. The scorching heat no longer bothered her, and she had learned to sleep through the occasional mortar attack that rattled the base. The Marines who shared the base with Sarah's Ranger unit maintained their distance and skepticism. They came from a different military culture, one that traditionally excluded women from combat roles. While Sarah's own unit had fully accepted her as an equal, these Marines viewed her as an unwelcome experiment forced upon them by politicians back home. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Sarah's immediate supervisor, had served 3 previous deployments and commanded respect throughout the base. He treated Sarah fairly, but pushed her harder than the male rangers, knowing she had to prove herself repeatedly in this environment. "Excellence is your only defense against prejudice," he told her during a quiet moment between missions. The local village where Sarah's unit conducted regular patrols had become increasingly hostile. Children who once waved at American soldiers now threw rocks and shouted curses. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy fighters were moving freely through the area, using civilian homes as safe houses. The situation required delicate handling to avoid creating more enemies among the local population. Sarah's linguistic abilities proved valuable during these tense encounters. She had studied Arabic during her training and possessed a natural ear for languages. While she could not conduct complex conversations, she understood enough to pick up on subtle cues that others missed. This skill had already prevented several potential confrontations from escalating into violence. The base's commanding officer, Colonel Harris, was a veteran of multiple conflicts who believed in leading by example. He made a point of eating with his soldiers, participating in training exercises, and maintaining an open-door policy for anyone with concerns. When several Marines complained about Sarah's presence, he listened politely but made his position clear. Competence, not gender, determined a soldier's value. During a particularly challenging patrol, Sarah's unit encountered a group of local women who were clearly distressed about something. The male soldiers struggled to communicate with them, as cultural barriers prevented direct interaction between unrelated men and women. Sarah stepped forward and used her limited Arabic to understand that several children were missing from the village. The missing children case consumed Sarah's attention for the next several days. She worked with village elders to piece together what had happened. Suspecting that enemy fighters had kidnapped the children to use as human shields or bargaining chips, her investigation skills, developed during advanced ranger training, proved invaluable in gathering information from reluctant witnesses. Meanwhile, tensions on the base reached a boiling point when several Marines openly questioned why a woman was taking the lead on such an important case. They argued that local men would never respect or cooperate with a female soldier, regardless of her rank or abilities. Sarah ignored their complaints and continued her work, knowing that children's lives hung in the balance. The breakthrough came when Sarah noticed inconsistencies in the stories told by different villagers. While most claimed the children had simply wandered off and gotten lost, a few older women hinted at darker possibilities. Sarah's patient questioning revealed that armed men had indeed taken the children during the night, threatening their families into silence. Acting on this intelligence, Sarah's unit planned a rescue operation for the following dawn. The suspected location was a compound several miles from the village, surrounded by rough terrain that would make approach difficult. Colonel Harris insisted on expanding the mission to include Marines from the base, creating a joint operation that would test inter-unit cooperation. The night before the rescue mission, Sarah checked and rechecked her equipment with the methodical precision her grandfather had taught her. She cleaned her rifle, organized her ammunition, and reviewed the mission plan until she could execute it blindfolded. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by thoughts of frightened children and their desperate families. As the joint patrol prepared to depart, tension crackled between the Rangers and Marines. The Marines had their own way of doing things and resented taking orders from Ranger NCOs. Several made pointed comments about women having no business in combat, though they were careful to speak quietly enough that Sarah could not hear clearly. The insertion went smoothly, with both units working together to establish a perimeter around the target compound. Sarah's team was assigned to the eastern approach, the most challenging route that required navigating rocky terrain and multiple potential ambush points. She moved with the silent grace that had earned her the nickname Ghost, every sense alert for signs of danger. Through her scope, Sarah observed the compound's defenses and counted at least 6 armed guards. The building showed signs of recent activity, with fresh tire tracks and equipment scattered around the courtyard. Most importantly, she spotted small pieces of children's clothing hanging from a line, confirming they had found the right location. The assault began at first light, with precise coordination between all units. Sarah's team eliminated 2 sentries without raising an alarm, while other teams moved into position. The operation required split-second timing to prevent the captors from harming the children during the rescue attempt. As Sarah's team breached the eastern wall, they encountered heavy resistance from defenders who had been expecting an attack. Bullets flew in all directions as both sides fought for control of the compound. Sarah moved through the chaos with deadly efficiency, her training taking over as conscious thought gave way to muscle memory and instinct. The children were found huddled in a back room, terrified but unharmed. Sarah was among the first to reach them, and her gentle demeanor helped calm their fears as other soldiers secured the area. The successful rescue operation saved 6 young lives and dealt a significant blow to enemy operations in the region. During the extraction, Sarah's unit came under attack from enemy reinforcements attempting to block their escape route. The joint patrol found itself outnumbered and surrounded, forced to fight their way out of an increasingly desperate situation. Communication between Rangers and Marines broke down as each unit reverted to their own tactical procedures under stress. In the confusion of battle, Sarah became separated from her team while providing covering fire for the evacuation of rescued children. She found herself alone in a defensive position, surrounded by enemy fighters who were closing in from multiple directions. Her radio crackled with urgent calls for her location, but she was too busy fighting to respond clearly. The Marines who had questioned her presence throughout the deployment suddenly found themselves in a position where they needed her skills to survive. Sarah's accurate fire and tactical awareness were all that stood between them and enemy forces intent on overrunning their position. In that moment, gender became irrelevant as survival instincts took priority over prejudice. The rescue operation's success brought temporary calm to the base, but Sarah knew the victory came with a price. Enemy forces in the region would be seeking revenge for their losses and the embarrassment of having children rescued from under their noses. Intelligence reports indicated increased chatter about planned attacks against the American base. The rescued children were safely returned to their families, and the village showed new signs of cooperation with coalition forces. Mothers who had previously hidden their faces when soldiers approached now nodded respectfully to Sarah during patrols. The successful mission had demonstrated that American forces genuinely cared about local civilian welfare, not just military objectives. Colonel Harris commended the joint patrol for their professionalism during the rescue, but privately expressed concerns about the breakdown in communication between units. He called a meeting with senior NCOs from both the Rangers and Marines to address the coordination issues that had nearly turned victory into disaster. During the debrief, several Marines reluctantly admitted that Sarah's performance had exceeded their expectations. Staff Sergeant Chen, who had been particularly vocal in his opposition to female soldiers, grudgingly acknowledged that her shooting skills and tactical awareness had saved lives during the extraction. However, deeper resentment still simmered beneath the surface. Sarah continued her regular duties without seeking special recognition for the rescue mission. She understood that every action was scrutinized more carefully because of her gender, and she refused to give critics any ammunition to use against her. Excellence had to be her constant standard, not just an occasional achievement. The base's daily routine resumed with increased security measures in response to intelligence warnings. Patrols were larger and more heavily armed, while defensive positions were reinforced with additional barriers and weapons emplacements. Everyone understood that retaliation was coming, but the timing and method remained unknown. Sarah's relationship with the local population continued to develop in ways that surprised even her. Women in the village began approaching her directly with information about suspicious activities, trusting her in ways they would never trust male soldiers. This intelligence proved invaluable in identifying potential threats before they could materialize into attacks. The Marines on base gradually began treating Sarah with grudging respect. Though several still made occasional comments designed to undermine her confidence, she learned to ignore the petty harassment and focus on her mission, knowing that actions would ultimately speak louder than words. Her fellow Rangers continued to support her unconditionally. 3 weeks after the rescue operation, intelligence sources reported a large enemy force gathering in the mountains surrounding the base. Intercepted communications suggested they were planning a coordinated assault designed to overrun American positions and capture prisoners for propaganda purposes. The base went on high alert as defensive preparations intensified. Sarah volunteered for a dangerous reconnaissance mission to gather more information about enemy positions and capabilities. The mission required a small team to infiltrate close to enemy lines and observe their activities without being detected. It was exactly the type of high-risk assignment that Sarah excelled at. But some questioned whether the mission was too dangerous for any soldier. Regardless of gender, the reconnaissance team consisted of 4 Rangers, including Sarah, led by Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. They would insert under cover of darkness and establish observation posts overlooking suspected enemy gathering areas. The mission timeline allowed for 48 hours of observation before extraction, with emergency procedures in place if they were discovered. As the team prepared for insertion, Sarah felt the familiar pre-mission tension that every soldier experienced before dangerous operations. She checked her equipment methodically, reviewed the mission plan, and mentally rehearsed emergency procedures. Her grandfather's Ranger tab, now sewn onto her uniform, served as a reminder of the warrior tradition she represented. The helicopter insertion went smoothly, with the team reaching their objective area without incident. They established 2 observation posts with overlapping fields of view, allowing continuous surveillance of enemy activities while maintaining security. Sarah partnered with Specialist Johnson, a young Ranger on his first deployment who looked to her for guidance. Through their scopes, the team observed enemy fighters moving equipment and supplies into positions overlooking the American base. The force was larger than intelligence estimates had suggested, with heavy weapons that could cause significant damage to base defenses. Sarah carefully documented enemy positions and capabilities while maintaining radio silence. On the second day of observation, enemy forces began moving toward the base in what appeared to be the beginning of their planned assault. The reconnaissance team faced a crucial decision: maintain their hidden positions and continue gathering intelligence, or risk exposure by transmitting immediate warnings to base defenders. Sarah advocated for breaking radio silence to warn their fellow soldiers. The warning transmission was brief but provided vital information about enemy approach routes and capabilities. Base defenders used this intelligence to adjust their defensive positions and prepare for the incoming assault. However, the transmission also revealed the reconnaissance team's presence to enemy forces, equipped with radio direction-finding equipment. Within hours, enemy patrols were searching the area where Sarah's team was hidden. The 4 Rangers found themselves trapped between advancing enemy forces and the ongoing assault on their base. Extraction was impossible while the base was under attack, leaving them to survive on their own until the situation stabilized. The assault on the base began at sunset with mortar and rocket attacks designed to suppress defensive positions. Sarah's team watched helplessly from their hidden position as explosions rocked the base perimeter. Radio communications crackled with urgent reports of breaches in defensive lines and requests for reinforcement. As darkness fell, enemy infantry began probing base defenses while Sarah's reconnaissance team remained trapped behind enemy lines. They could hear the battle raging but were unable to assist their fellow soldiers. Specialist Johnson showed signs of panic, but Sarah's calm leadership helped maintain team cohesion during the crisis. The first night of the assault tested everyone's nerves as enemy forces pressed their attack against determined base defenders. Sarah's team provided what assistance they could by calling in accurate artillery strikes on enemy positions they could observe from their vantage point. Their intelligence proved crucial in breaking up several enemy assault attempts. By dawn, the assault had been repelled, but enemy forces remained in the area and continued searching for the reconnaissance team. The Rangers were running low on water and ammunition, while enemy patrols systematically searched every possible hiding place. Sarah knew they would eventually be discovered if they remained passive. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez made the difficult decision to attempt infiltration back to friendly lines during daylight hours. The team would have to cross several miles of enemy-controlled territory while avoiding patrols actively searching for them. It was an extremely dangerous plan, but their alternatives were even worse. The movement began carefully with Sarah taking point due to her exceptional fieldcraft skills. She guided the team through rocky terrain that offered concealment, but made silent movement difficult. Every step required careful consideration as enemy patrols passed nearby. Sometimes within yards of their hidden positions, halfway to friendly lines, the team encountered an enemy checkpoint that blocked their intended route. They were forced to take a longer path through an area that intelligence had identified as heavily mined. Sarah used her training to detect and mark dangerous areas while leading her team through the hazardous terrain. As they approached the final obstacle before reaching safety, enemy forces spotted them and opened fire. The reconnaissance team found themselves pinned down in open ground, with limited cover and dwindling ammunition. Radio calls for assistance went unanswered as base defenders dealt with their own problems. Pinned down by enemy fire with ammunition running low, Sarah's reconnaissance team faced a desperate situation. The rocky outcropping that provided their only cover was gradually being chipped away by concentrated enemy gunfire. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was wounded in the shoulder, leaving Sarah as the senior unwounded member of the team. Specialist Johnson had taken a bullet in the leg and was losing blood despite field dressing applied to the wound. The fourth team member, Corporal Williams, was down to his last magazine of ammunition and reported that his radio had been damaged by shrapnel. Sarah assessed their tactical situation with the cold calculation her training had ingrained. The enemy had positioned themselves to cut off all escape routes while maintaining disciplined fire that prevented the Rangers from moving, without exposing themselves to certain death. Sarah counted at least 12 enemy fighters in positions that commanded overlapping fields of fire. Traditional military doctrine suggested that their situation was hopeless. However, Sarah's Ranger training had prepared her for exactly this type of scenario. She studied the terrain with fresh eyes, looking for opportunities that desperate circumstances might reveal. A shallow ravine to their east offered potential concealment, but reaching it would require crossing 30 yards of open ground under enemy observation. Sarah made her decision with the swift certainty that had served her throughout her military career. She would create a diversion by engaging the enemy positions directly, drawing their fire while her wounded teammates moved to better cover. It was not a plan that prioritized her own survival, but it offered the best chance for the team's overall success. Rodriguez tried to protest when Sarah outlined her plan, but she had already begun preparing for the assault. She redistributed ammunition among the team members and briefed them on rally points and extraction procedures. Her calm professionalism in the face of overwhelming odds steadied the nerves of her fellow Rangers. The assault began with Sarah laying down suppressive fire while moving between positions to confuse enemy shooters about her location. Her accurate marksmanship forced several enemy fighters to take cover, creating brief windows of opportunity for her teammates to move toward the ravine. Each bound forward required split-second timing and absolute commitment. As her teammates reached better cover, Sarah found herself increasingly isolated and under concentrated fire from multiple directions. Enemy bullets struck the rocks around her position, sending fragments of stone flying like shrapnel. She could hear enemy voices coordinating their movements as they attempted to flank her. Position. Sarah's ammunition supply dwindled rapidly as she maintained the intense rate of fire necessary to keep enemy heads down. She had started the firefight with 6 full magazines and was now down to her final rounds. Each shot had to count, and her ranger marksmanship training ensured that most did find their targets. The sound of approaching helicopters gave Sarah hope that extraction might be possible, but the aircraft remained too distant to provide immediate assistance. She could hear the distinctive rotor signature of Apache gunships, but they were evidently engaged with other enemy forces elsewhere in the area. Her team remained on their own for the foreseeable future. Enemy forces began their final assault on Sarah's position as her ammunition ran critically low. She could see them moving through the rocks, using fire and maneuver tactics to close the distance while maintaining pressure. Her rifle clicked empty just as the first enemy fighter appeared around a boulder less than 20 feet away. Sarah transitioned to her sidearm with practiced smoothness, but knew that her pistol's limited range and ammunition capacity made it inadequate for the current situation. She had trained extensively in close-quarters combat, but facing multiple armed opponents with minimal ammunition was beyond even ranger capabilities. She prepared for what might be her final fight. The enemy fighter who had flanked her position raised his rifle to take the killing shot, but hesitated when he realized his target was a woman. That moment of surprise gave Sarah the opening she needed to engage him with her pistol, dropping him before he could recover from his shock. Her movement to a new position drew fire from other enemy fighters who had not yet seen her clearly. The firefight devolved into a deadly game of hide-and-seek among the rocks, with Sarah using every trick her training had taught her to stay ahead of pursuers who outnumbered her overwhelmingly. She moved constantly, never remaining in one position long enough for enemy fighters to coordinate their assault. Her knowledge of small unit tactics served her well in the chaotic environment. As Sarah emerged from behind a large boulder to engage another enemy position, she came face to face with 3 enemy fighters who had been attempting to surround her. They were less than 10 feet away and raising their weapons when Sarah's training took over completely. Time seemed to slow as her muscle memory executed movements drilled into her through thousands of hours of practice. Her first shot took down the lead fighter before he could bring his rifle to bear. Sarah was already moving as she fired, using the momentum of her movement to throw off the aim of the remaining enemies, while transitioning to her next target. Her second shot caught the second fighter center mass as he tried to track her movement. The third enemy fighter managed to get off a shot that passed close enough to Sarah's head that she could feel the bullet's passage. Her return fire was instantaneous and accurate, dropping the final member of the flanking team. In less than 3 seconds, Sarah had eliminated 3 armed opponents in close-quarters combat. The gunfight attracted the attention of other enemy forces in the area, who began converging on Sarah's position from multiple directions. She could hear their voices calling to each other as they coordinated their movements. Her ammunition was nearly exhausted and her position was becoming untenable as enemy forces closed in from all sides. Sarah's radio crackled with urgent calls from her teammates, who had reached the ravine but were too far away to provide effective support. Rodriguez was still bleeding and needed medical attention, while Johnson's leg wound was worsening. Sarah made the difficult decision to continue fighting alone rather than compromise their concealed position. The next wave of enemy attackers approached more cautiously, having learned to respect Sarah's marksmanship capabilities. They used grenades to try to flush her from cover, but her mobility and knowledge of the terrain allowed her to stay ahead of the explosions. Each detonation filled the air with dust and debris that actually aided her concealment. Sarah's pistol ran dry after engaging 2 more enemy fighters, leaving her armed only with a combat knife and the tactical knowledge that had kept her alive this long. She could hear enemy voices getting closer as they searched for her among the rocks. Her situation had progressed beyond desperate into territory where survival depended on factors beyond training and skill. The sound of approaching helicopters grew louder, suggesting that extraction might finally be available. Sarah could see Apache gunships engaging enemy positions in the distance, their cannon fire creating distinctive plumes of dust and smoke. However, the aircraft were still too far away to affect her immediate tactical situation. As Sarah prepared for what might be her final stand, She thought of her grandfather and the warrior tradition she represented. The little girl they had called Princess was about to demonstrate exactly what that nickname really meant. She gripped her knife and waited for the enemy to find her, determined to make them pay dearly for whatever victory they might achieve. The helicopters that Sarah had been hearing finally came into view, but they were not the rescue aircraft she had hoped for. Instead, a Marine transport helicopter was making an emergency landing about half a mile from her position, trailing smoke from what appeared to be engine damage. The aircraft had clearly been hit by enemy fire and was conducting a forced landing in hostile territory. As the damaged helicopter touched down heavily, Sarah could see figures jumping from the aircraft before it fully settled. Through her scope, she counted 7 Marines who immediately began establishing a defensive perimeter around their disabled aircraft. They were now trapped in the same area as Sarah's team, facing the same enemy forces that had been hunting the Rangers. The Marine squad's arrival changed the tactical situation dramatically. Enemy forces in the area now had to divide their attention between hunting for Sarah and her hidden team, while also dealing with a more obvious threat represented by the Marines around their helicopter. Sarah realized this might provide the distraction her team needed to escape or call for effective support. However, the Marines were in immediate danger from enemy forces who had been converging on Sarah's position. They had landed directly in the middle of a hostile area without knowing the full extent of enemy presence. Their defensive perimeter was adequate for normal operations but insufficient for their current situation. Surrounded by determined attackers, Sarah watched through her scope as enemy fighters began maneuvering to attack the Marine position. The Marines were setting up their defense according to standard procedures, but they clearly did not understand the size and disposition of the enemy force they faced. Sarah realized she had crucial intelligence that could save their lives if she could communicate with them. Her damaged radio was still capable of receiving transmissions, and Sarah could hear the Marine squad leader calling for immediate evacuation and close air support. His communications revealed that they were unaware of the enemy positions that Sarah had been observing for the past hour. Without warning, they would walk into a carefully prepared ambush. Sarah made the difficult decision to leave her concealed position and attempt to reach the Marine perimeter. Her teammates in the ravine were relatively safe as long as they remained hidden, but the Marines needed immediate assistance to survive the coming assault. She began moving carefully through the rocks, using every bit of cover available. The journey to the Marine position required crossing several hundred yards of terrain that was partially controlled by enemy forces. Sarah moved with the silent precision that had earned her the nickname Ghost, but she knew that time was running out. Enemy fighters were already positioning themselves to attack the Marines from multiple directions. As Sarah approached the Marine perimeter, she encountered 2 enemy fighters who were setting up a machine gun position to enfilade the helicopter's landing zone. They were so focused on their task that they did not notice her approach until she was close enough to engage them with her knife. The silent elimination of these threats prevented what could have been devastating fire on the Marine position. Sarah reached the edge of the Marine defensive perimeter just as the first enemy probing attacks began. She called out the proper challenge and password, identifying herself as a friendly ranger before emerging from cover. The Marines were surprised to see her but quickly realized that she possessed vital intelligence about enemy positions and capabilities. Staff Sergeant Martinez, the Marine squad leader, was a veteran of multiple deployments who immediately recognized the value of Sarah's tactical knowledge. She quickly briefed him on enemy positions, numbers, and likely attack routes based on her extended observation. The information allowed the Marines to adjust their defensive positions before the main assault began. The enemy attack commenced, with mortar fire designed to suppress the Marine positions while infantry moved to assault positions. Sarah's intelligence proved accurate, as enemy fighters appeared exactly where she had predicted they would. The Marines were ready for them, turning what should have been a successful ambush into a costly failure for the attackers. During the firefight, Sarah noticed that the Marines were treating her differently than she had become accustomed to on the base. These were not the same Marines who had questioned her presence and capabilities. They were focused solely on survival and appreciated any assistance that increased their chances of living through the battle. As the fight intensified, Sarah took position with the Marines and contributed her marksmanship skills to their defense. Her accurate fire helped break up several enemy assault attempts while her tactical awareness allowed her to spot threats that others missed. The Marines quickly learned to trust her judgment and follow her suggestions about enemy movements. The battle raged for nearly 2 hours before close air support finally arrived in the form of Apache gunships that Sarah's team had been hearing in the distance. The helicopters made quick work of exposed enemy positions, but many fighters had taken cover in areas where airstrikes would risk hitting friendly forces. Ground combat continued even after air support engaged. During a lull in the fighting, Sarah used the Marines' more powerful radio to contact her trapped teammates and coordinate their movement to the helicopter landing zone. Rodriguez was still losing blood from his shoulder wound, and Johnson's leg injury was making movement difficult. The reunion of the reconnaissance team with the Marine squad created a larger defensive force, but also more people to evacuate. The evacuation helicopters arrived just as enemy forces launched their final desperate assault on the combined American position. Sarah found herself fighting alongside Marines who had never questioned her presence or capabilities, men who judged her solely on her actions under fire. She performed with the same excellence that had carried her through Ranger School and every subsequent challenge. As the evacuation began, Sarah volunteered to provide rearguard coverage while wounded personnel were loaded onto the helicopters. Her position allowed her to observe enemy movements and call out threats to the evacuation teams. Several Marines later credited her warnings with saving their lives during the chaotic extraction process. The helicopter carrying Sarah's group lifted off under fire, with enemy bullets striking the aircraft's armor as they climbed to safety. Through the window, Sarah could see enemy fighters emerging from cover to fire at the departing aircraft. The battle was over, but the memory of those intense hours would stay with everyone who survived the experience. During the flight back to base, Staff Sergeant Martinez approached Sarah and extended his hand in respect. "I don't know what unit you're from, Ranger, but you fight like a warrior," he said. "My Marines and I owe you our lives." Sarah accepted the handshake but deflected the praise, insisting that they had all done their jobs as soldiers. The helicopter landed at the base just as medical personnel rushed forward to treat the wounded. Rodriguez and Johnson were immediately taken to the medical facility, while Sarah submitted to a brief examination to ensure she had not been injured during the firefight. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, leaving her exhausted but alert. Colonel Harris was waiting for Sarah when she finished her medical evaluation. His expression was unreadable as he gestured for her to follow him to his office. Sarah wondered if she was about to be disciplined for abandoning her reconnaissance position, even though she was confident that her actions had been necessary to save lives. Instead of criticism, Colonel Harris offered praise for Sarah's tactical decisions and combat performance. The intelligence she had gathered during the reconnaissance mission had proven invaluable in defeating the enemy assault on the base. Her actions during the rescue of the Marine squad had demonstrated leadership and courage under fire that exemplified the best traditions of the Army Rangers. The debriefing session that followed included detailed questions about enemy tactics, capabilities, and organization. Sarah's observations provided intelligence analysts with crucial information about how enemy forces operated in the region. Her experience would influence future operations and potentially save many more lives beyond those she had directly protected during the battle. Word of Sarah's actions during the reconnaissance mission and Marine rescue spread quickly throughout the base. The Marines who had been saved began telling their story to anyone who would listen, describing how a single Ranger had provided the intelligence and firepower that saved their lives. Their accounts painted Sarah as a warrior whose skills transcended traditional expectations. The Marines who had previously questioned Sarah's presence found themselves in an uncomfortable position. Staff Sergeant Chen, who had been among her most vocal critics, approached her quietly during chow time. "I was wrong about you, Ranger," he said simply. "You've proven yourself in ways that matter." Sarah accepted his words without gloating, understanding that respect earned in combat was more valuable than any official recognition. The rescued Marine squad, led by Staff Sergeant Martinez, made a point of eating with Sarah's Ranger unit for the remainder of their time on base. They shared war stories and tactical knowledge, treating Sarah as an equal member of the warrior community. Their acceptance helped bridge the gap between the different military units stationed at the base. Colonel Harris called Sarah to his office 3 days after the firefight to discuss her future assignments. He had received multiple requests from other units asking for her to be assigned to their operations. Word of her tactical skills and cool performance under fire had reached higher headquarters, creating opportunities for advancement that few soldiers ever received. However, Sarah's immediate concern was not her career but the welfare of her teammates. Rodriguez was recovering well from his shoulder wound, but would require several weeks of limited duty. Johnson's leg injury was more serious and would likely result in his medical evacuation back to the United States. She felt responsible for their welfare. As the senior unwounded member of their reconnaissance team, the intelligence gathered during Sarah's mission continued to pay dividends as analysts used her observations to plan follow-up operations. Enemy forces in the region had been significantly degraded by the failed assault on the base and subsequent airstrikes guided by Sarah's targeting information. Her contribution to operational success extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. A week after the battle, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Master Sergeant Williams from the Army Ranger Regiment headquarters had flown in specifically to speak with her about her performance and future assignments. He was a legend within the Ranger community, having served in every major conflict of the past 2 decades. His presence indicated that Sarah's actions had attracted attention at the highest levels. Master Sergeant Williams conducted an extensive interview with Sarah, asking detailed questions about her training, her tactical decisions during the mission, and her thoughts on integration of women into combat roles. He was particularly interested in how she had maintained unit cohesion and effectiveness under extreme stress while dealing with skepticism from other military personnel. The interview revealed that Sarah was being considered for assignment to a special operations task force that conducted the most dangerous missions in the region. The unit operated with minimal oversight and maximum autonomy, requiring personnel who could think independently while maintaining absolute reliability. Few soldiers were ever offered such an opportunity, and even fewer succeeded in the role. Sarah expressed interest in the assignment but requested that her current teammates be given priority for medical care and follow-up assignments. Her loyalty to Rodriguez and Johnson impressed Master Sergeant Williams, who noted that concern for subordinate welfare was a crucial leadership trait. He assured her that their needs would be addressed appropriately. The formal recommendation process required Sarah to undergo additional psychological evaluation and tactical testing. Military psychologists wanted to ensure that her combat performance reflected genuine capability rather than luck or adrenaline-fueled heroics. The testing was rigorous, but Sarah's results confirmed what her actions had already demonstrated. During the evaluation period, Sarah continued her regular duties while dealing with increased attention from personnel throughout the base. Some sought her out for tactical advice, while others simply wanted to meet the female ranger who had become legendary among the troops. She handled the attention with the same quiet professionalism that had carried her through previous challenges. The tactical testing took place in a specially constructed facility that simulated various combat scenarios. Sarah was required to demonstrate her abilities in urban warfare, desert operations, and close-quarters combat. Each exercise was designed to push her skills to their limits while evaluating her decision-making under stress. Her performance exceeded expectations in every category. One particular exercise required Sarah to plan and execute a hostage rescue mission using only the resources available in a degraded communication environment. She had to coordinate with simulated friendly forces while adapting to changing intelligence and unexpected complications. Her ability to maintain mission focus while adjusting tactics impressed the evaluators. The psychological evaluation proved more challenging than the tactical testing, as it required Sarah to examine her motivations and emotional responses to combat stress. Military psychologists were particularly interested in how she dealt with the isolation and skepticism she had faced as one of the few women in combat roles. Her responses revealed remarkable emotional resilience and maturity. During one session, the psychologist asked Sarah about the nickname Princess and how it affected her performance. Sarah explained that the name had originally been used to diminish her, but she had transformed it into a source of strength. "A real princess protects her people," she said. "That's exactly what I do as a ranger." The evaluation process concluded with a comprehensive review board that included senior officers from multiple branches of service. Sarah presented her case for assignment to the Special Operations Task Force, outlining her qualifications and explaining her tactical philosophy. The board's questions were challenging, but her answers demonstrated both competence and confidence. 2 weeks after completing the evaluation, Sarah received notification that she had been selected for the Special Operations assignment. The orders came with a promotion to Staff Sergeant and assignment to a classified unit operating throughout the region. She would be leaving the base where she had proven herself, but carrying the respect and admiration of everyone who had served alongside her. The promotion ceremony was attended by personnel from throughout the base, including many of the Marines who had initially questioned her presence. Colonel Harris personally pinned the new rank insignia on Sarah's uniform, while praising her contributions to unit effectiveness and morale. The ceremony represented not just personal advancement, but validation of women's capabilities in combat. Earl's Eye Staff Sergeant Martinez and his Marine squad made a special presentation to Sarah before her departure. They had commissioned a custom combat patch that depicted a chess piece, a queen, with the motto, "Checkmate, Princess," embroidered below. The patch acknowledged both her nickname and her tactical superiority in a way that honored rather than mocked her achievements. Sarah's final night at the base was spent with her Ranger teammates, sharing memories and discussing lessons learned during their deployment. Rodriguez had recovered sufficiently to return to duty, while Johnson was preparing for medical evacuation, but expected to make a full recovery. Their bond had been strengthened by shared combat experience and mutual respect. As Sarah packed her gear for the new assignment, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The little girl who had been mockingly called Princess had become a warrior whose reputation was built on competence, courage, and unwavering dedication to mission accomplishment. She had proven that excellence recognized no gender boundaries. The helicopter that would take Sarah to her new assignment arrived at dawn, its rotors cutting through the morning air with familiar intensity. As she walked toward the aircraft, Sarah carried herself with the confidence of a proven warrior. The challenges that lay ahead would be different, but she was ready to face them with the same determination that had carried her through every previous test. 6 months later, Staff Sergeant Sarah Martinez found herself leading a special operations team in the most dangerous region of the theater. Her new unit operated in small groups, conducting high-value target missions that required absolute precision and uncompromising professionalism. The team members had been handpicked from elite units across all branches of service, creating a group where capability mattered more than background. Her team consisted of 6 operators, each with specialized skills that complemented the others. They had initially been skeptical about working with a female team leader, but Sarah's reputation had preceded her, and their first few missions together had eliminated any doubts about her qualifications. They functioned as a seamless unit, trusting each other completely in situations where hesitation meant death. The mission that would define Sarah's legacy began with intelligence about a high-value target who was planning a major terrorist attack against civilian targets. The individual was hiding in a compound deep in enemy territory, protected by a large security force and sophisticated defensive measures. Traditional military approaches would likely result in the target's escape or the deaths of innocent civilians being held as human shields. Sarah's team was tasked with conducting a surgical strike that would eliminate the target while minimizing collateral damage. The mission required infiltration through heavily defended territory, precise timing to avoid civilian casualties, and immediate extraction under hostile conditions. It was exactly the type of operation that had been deemed too dangerous for conventional forces. The planning phase took 2 weeks, with Sarah's team studying every aspect of the target area through satellite imagery, intelligence reports, and reconnaissance by local assets. They identified guard rotations, escape routes, civilian movement patterns, and potential complications that could compromise the mission. Sarah insisted on contingency plans for every possible scenario, no matter how unlikely. The insertion took place during a moonless night, with Sarah's team moving on foot through terrain that channeled them toward the target compound. They moved in complete silence, communicating through hand signals and maintaining spacing that would prevent multiple casualties from a single enemy action. Every step was calculated to avoid detection by sophisticated surveillance systems. 3 miles from the target, Sarah's team encountered an unexpected enemy patrol that threatened to compromise their approach. The patrol was moving directly toward their planned route, and avoiding them would require a detour that might prevent the team from reaching the target before dawn. Sarah made the decision to eliminate the patrol silently, using techniques perfected through months of training. The patrol consisted of 4 enemy fighters who were eliminated without raising an alarm, but their disappearance would eventually be noticed when they failed to report in. Sarah's team now had a limited window of opportunity before the compound went on high alert. They accelerated their movement while maintaining the stealth that was crucial to mission success. The compound itself was a fortified structure surrounded by multiple layers of security. Guards patrolled the perimeter while others manned fixed positions with clear fields of fire. Sarah observed the defenses through her scope, identifying weak points and timing guard movements. The intelligence reports had been accurate, but seeing the target in person allowed for final tactical adjustments. Sarah positioned her team in overwatch positions that provided covering fire while she and 2 operators moved to the compound's weak point. The entry required climbing a wall while avoiding detection by roving patrols, then moving through the interior to locate the target. The civilians being held as hostages were in a separate building, complicating the tactical situation. The assault began with Sarah's team eliminating perimeter guards simultaneously, creating a brief window of confusion that allowed the entry team to breach the compound. Sarah led from the front, moving through corridors with the practiced efficiency that had made her legendary among special operations personnel. Every movement was deliberate and calculated. The target was located in a secure room on the 2nd floor, surrounded by bodyguards who had been alerted by the sound of gunfire outside. Sarah's team coordinated their assault with precision timing, using flashbangs to disorient defenders while minimizing the risk to civilians in adjacent rooms. The entire operation lasted less than 90 seconds from breach to target elimination. During the extraction, Sarah's team came under attack from enemy reinforcements who had responded to the alarm. The firefight that followed tested every skill they had developed through training and previous missions. Sarah coordinated her team's movements while engaging multiple enemy positions, demonstrating the leadership abilities that had earned her the special operations assignment. The extraction helicopter arrived under fire, with the pilot maneuvering expertly to provide a landing zone while Sarah's team provided covering fire. As her operators boarded the aircraft, Sarah remained on the ground to ensure everyone made it safely aboard. She was the last person to board, maintaining her responsibility for her team's welfare even under extreme pressure. The successful mission eliminated a major terrorist threat while rescuing civilian hostages who would have certainly been killed if conventional forces had attempted an assault. Sarah's leadership and tactical skills had made the difference between mission success and potential disaster. The operation became a case study in special operations planning and execution. In the months that followed, Sarah led numerous similar missions with consistent success. Her reputation within the special operations community grew as she demonstrated that effective leadership transcended gender boundaries. Other female soldiers began seeking assignment to special operations units, inspired by Sarah's example and the opportunities she had created. The nickname Princess evolved during this period from a term of mockery to one of respect within the special operations community. Enemy forces learned to fear the Ghost Princess who appeared without warning, to eliminate their leaders and disrupt their operations. Sarah had transformed a childhood taunt into a warrior's title that struck fear into her enemies' hearts. Colonel Harris, now promoted to Brigadier General, visited Sarah's unit during an inspection tour and personally congratulated her on her continued success. He noted that her example had influenced military policy regarding women in combat roles, opening doors for future generations of female warriors. Sarah's achievements had implications far beyond her individual success. As Sarah prepared for her next deployment, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from a small Texas town to the pinnacle of military special operations. The little girl who had learned to shoot with her grandfather had become a warrior whose skills were recognized and respected by the most elite soldiers in the world. Her grandfather's Ranger tab, still sewn on her uniform, served as a reminder of the warrior tradition she represented. The path had been difficult, requiring her to prove herself repeatedly in ways that her male counterparts never faced. However, Each challenge had made her stronger and more determined to succeed. Sarah's story became an inspiration for young women who dreamed of military service but faced skepticism about their capabilities. Her example demonstrated that excellence, determination, and unwavering commitment to mission accomplishment could overcome any obstacle. The princess had indeed become a warrior, protecting her people with the same fierce dedication that had carried her through every challenge. The legacy Sarah left was not just one of individual achievement, but of breaking barriers that had limited opportunities for others. Her success paved the way for future generations of women who would serve in combat roles, proving that courage and competence recognized no gender boundaries. The little girl they had called Princess had redefined what that title could mean in the hands of a true warrior.